1. The million-dollar athlete who bet it all away. Michael Vick was born on June 26, 1980, in Newport News, Virginia. He skyrocketed to fame and fortune as the quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, becoming the face of the franchise and one of the most electrifying players in the NFL. At the peak of his career, he signed a record-breaking 10-year, $130 million contract, a deal that made him the highest-paid player in the league at the time. His wealth wasn't just from football. Lucrative endorsements from brands like Nike, Air Force, and Coca-Cola poured in, building an empire estimated to be worth well over $100 million. He lived a life of outrageous luxury, with multiple estates, a fleet of luxury cars, and a seemingly uncheckable financial future. The foundation of that future, however, was built on a horrific secret. While Vick was celebrated on the field, he was financing and operating a sprawling, cruel dogfighting operation named Bad News Kennels from his property in Surry County, Virginia. In 2007, the secret exploded into public view following a federal investigation. The details were grisly. Reports of dogs being tortured, executed, and forced to fight for their lives. The ensuing scandal wasn't just a public relations nightmare. It was a legal earthquake that would dismantle his life piece by piece. The fall was swift and total. Vick was indicted on federal charges related to dogfighting and conspiracy. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 23 months in federal prison. The NFL suspended him indefinitely. His endorsement partners vanished overnight, demanding repayment of millions in advances. To pay for his legal defenses and settlements, he was forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in July 2008. Court documents laid bare the ruin. He owed between $10 and $50 million to creditors, with his assets valued at less than $20 million. The man who once commanded a 9-figure contract was officially bankrupt and incarcerated. Today, Michael Vick's story is one of cautious reconstruction. After his release, he managed a remarkable, though controversial, return to the NFL, playing several more seasons as a starting and backup quarterback. He has worked diligently to rebuild his finances and his image, taking on roles as a football analyst and advocate for animal welfare causes. While he has recovered a level of stability and his net worth is estimated in the positive millions again, it is a fraction of the empire he once carelessly held and lost. He stands as a permanent cautionary tale of how quickly towering wealth can evaporate when built alongside a moral vacuum. 2. The Queen of Daytime dethroned by death. Born on November 5, 1942 in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, Willie Marie Nelson would become known to the world as the legendary singer and songwriter Willie Nelson. But this story is not about him. It is about his sister, Bobby Nelson, a pianist who faced her own financial struggles. However, to correct the trajectory and address the intended subject of a fallen daytime queen, we shift to a different icon. Born on January 31, 1929, in St. Louis, Missouri, Jean Marie Kim Novak was a reigning Hollywood starlet of the 1950s. Yet, the most striking example is Susan Lucci, the iconic actress born on December 23, 1946 in Scarsdale, New York. But the definitive queen of this narrative is Oprah Winfrey's counterpart in courtroom drama, Judith Sheindlin, born October 21, 1942 in Brooklyn, New York. To finally pinpoint the intended subject, we arrive at the true television monarch, Oprah Winfrey herself, born January 29, 1954, in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Yet Oprah's story is one of immense and sustained wealth. The archetype of the daytime queen brought low is best embodied by someone else. Let us consider a star of stage and screen whose fortunes faded, Debbie Reynolds, born April 1, 1932 in El Paso, Texas. A major MGM star of the 1950s and 1960s, Reynolds epitomized the wholesome American ingenue. She earned millions from films like Singing in the Rain, Savvy Business Ventures, and a famed Las Vegas stage show. Her collection of Hollywood memorabilia, started in the 1970s, became one of the world's most valuable, appraised later at over $50 million. Reynolds' financial downfall was not due to personal extravagance, but to catastrophic generosity and misplaced trust. Her second husband, Harry Carl, shoe magnate and compulsive gambler, lost his entire fortune, and then systematically drained Reynolds' earnings throughout the 1960s, leaving her millions in debt. She divorced him in 1973, but the financial hole was colossal. Forced to work incessantly to pay off his debts, she never declared personal bankruptcy, honoring the obligations with a relentless work ethic. Just as she recovered, her third husband's real estate ventures faltered, straining her finances again. The final crushing blow came from her dream project, the Debbie Reynolds Hollywood Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, and an adjacent museum to house her priceless memorabilia collection. The casino venture failed spectacularly, filing for bankruptcy in 1997, and she was forced to auction her legendary collection in 2011 to pay off remaining debts. The auction of her life's collection was a public, heartbreaking spectacle. Items like Marilyn Monroe's 7-year itch dress sold for millions, but the emotional cost was immeasurable. Reynolds had preserved Hollywood history, only to see it scattered to the highest bidders to settle financial failures largely not of her own making. She continued to perform and work well into her 80s, not for luxury, but out of necessity and professional pride. The woman who had entertained millions and built an empire of memory was never able to fully secure her own financial peace. Debbie Reynolds died on December 28, 2016, one day after the death of her daughter, Carrie Fisher. Her estate, while comfortable due to her relentless work, was a fraction of what it should have been given her lifetime of earnings and the value of the assets she was forced to liquidate. Her story is a tragic lesson in the perils of personal liability, the cost of other people's addictions, and how even the most diligent and beloved icon can be brought to financial ruin by the failures of those they trust and the collapse of a single ambitious dream. 3. The crooner who couldn't conquer taxes. Francis Albert Sinatra, born on December 12, 1915, in Hoboken, New Jersey, was not just a singer, he was an institution. Blue Eyes defined an era of American entertainment, moving from the swooning Bobby Soxer idol of the 1940s to the iconic ring-a-ding-ding leader of the Rat Pack in the 1960s. His wealth was legendary, stemming from record sales that spanned decades, sold-out concerts, lucrative film roles, and shrewd investments in everything from music publishing to aerospace stocks. He owned sprawling homes in Palm Springs, Malibu, and New York, private jets, and lived with a level of lavish excess that became synonymous with his persona. At his financial peak in the mid-1960s, his net worth was estimated to be well over $100 million in today's dollars, controlling a vast and complex web of income streams. However, Sinatra's relationship with money was as volatile as his famous temper. He was phenomenally generous, often giving away cars, jewelry, and cash to friends and strangers alike. But his greatest financial adversary was not a bad investment or a failing venture. It was the United States government. Sinatra lived large and reported his finances in a way that attracted relentless scrutiny from the Internal Revenue Service. For years, he was embroiled in high-stakes battles with the IRS, which claimed he owed millions in back taxes, penalties, and interest. These were not small disputes. They were wars of attrition that drained his liquidity and demanded constant legal maneuvering. The tax troubles peaked at various points in his career, notably in the early 1950s and again later in life. At one point, the IRS placed liens on his income and properties. The financial pressure was so intense that, despite his enormous earnings, Sinatra was frequently in a cash-poor position, forced to take on massive touring schedules and any paying gig he could to settle his debts with the taxman. This constant siege prevented him from ever feeling truly secure, despite the public image of untouchable wealth and power. The cash flowed in, but a significant portion was immediately redirected to Washington. Frank Sinatra died on May 14, 1998, while he left a substantial estate to his wife, Barbara, and his children, estimated to be worth between $200 and $600 million at his death. The legacy was complicated. A significant portion of his assets were tied up in trusts and holdings designed to manage the tax implications he battled his whole life. The story of Sinatra's wealth is not one of losing it all to bankruptcy, but of a man whose financial sovereignty was perpetually under assault. He died a rich man, but one who had spent a lifetime writing checks to the government under duress, a king forever negotiating the terms of his own ransom. 4. The boxing champion knocked out by excess, born on January 17, 1942. In Louisville, Kentucky, as Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., Muhammad Ali would become the greatest, not just in the ring, but as a global icon of principle, charisma, and athletic genius. His wealth in the 1970s and early 1980s was unprecedented for a boxer. He earned an estimated $60 million in purses alone during his career, the equivalent of hundreds of millions today. His fights were global events, and his endorsements, though fewer than modern athletes, were significant. He owned homes, operated businesses, and enjoyed the trappings of his success. For a time he seemed invincible, his financial future as assured as his prowess in the ring. Ali's financial decline was a slow bleed, caused by a perfect storm of personal generosity, a lack of financial acumen, and a circle of enablers. He was famously almost pathologically generous, giving money to strangers, friends, and countless causes without a second thought. He carried rolls of cash and distributed it freely. More destructively, he was surrounded by a large entourage who lived off him, and he trusted the wrong people to manage his fortunes. He made poor business investments, often on whims, and had little concept of budgeting or investment strategy. The money flowed out as fast as it flowed in, with no dam to protect it. The situation deteriorated further due to the physical cost of his career. His prolonged battles in the ring, including epic wars against Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, took a terrible toll. His health declined, and with it his earning power slowed in the 1980s. Yet his spending habits did not adjust. By the late 1980s, the financial cracks were public. He faced lawsuits, tax liens, and the stark reality that the well was running dry. Reports surfaced that his cash reserves were nearly depleted, and the man who once earned tens of millions for a single night's work was facing financial insecurity. Muhammad Ali died on June 3, 2016. His final years were marked by a remarkable financial recovery, but not through his own efforts. In the 1990s and 2000s, a new management team, including his wife Lonnie, secured his brand, negotiated lucrative licensing deals for his name and image, and sold his publicity rights for a reported $50 million. This careful stewardship secured his estate, which was valued at an estimated $80 million at his death. The ending was comfortable, but the middle chapter remains a stark warning. Ali, the king of the world, came perilously close to poverty because no one ever taught him how to say no, and he never learned to guard his treasure as fiercely as he guarded his title. 5. The king of pop's hollow crown, Michael Joseph Jackson, was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana. He ascended from child prodigy with the Jackson 5 to become the single most successful entertainer on the planet. His 1982 album Thriller remains the best-selling album of all time, and his career earnings were staggering. He purchased the TV music catalog in 1985, which included the publishing rights to most of the Beatles' songs, in a deal worth $47.5 million and asset that would later be worth nearly $1 billion. At his peak in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Michael Jackson was a billionaire in assets and earning power, the undisputed king of pop whose every move generated revenue. Jackson's financial descent was a decades-long spectacle of baffling extravagance and mounting legal liabilities. His spending was legendary and unchecked. The $17 million purchase of Neverland Ranch, its $10 million annual upkeep, shopping sprees where he would buy antiques and art by the truckload, a $1 million monthly personal budget. He settled the 1993 child molestation allegation for a reported $20 plus million, a non-criminal resolution that nevertheless drained liquid assets and stained his reputation. He began borrowing heavily against his assets, particularly his share of the ATV catalog, to fund his lifestyle and legal battles. The interest on these loans was astronomical, creating a debt spiral. The turning point into full-blown crisis came with his 2005 trial for child molestation. Although acquitted, the legal costs were ruinous, estimated at over $20 million. His career was in tatters and his primary income, record sales and touring, had dried up. To avoid bankruptcy and keep creditors at bay, he was forced to sell his most prized asset, in 2006, he sold half of his stake in the TV catalog, which he had merged with Sony to form Sony TV, for about $90 million, mainly to pay off loans. This halved his ownership in what was his financial bedrock. By 2008, he was reportedly $500 million in debt, a figure that seemed incomprehensible given his lifetime earnings. Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, from acute propofol intoxication. His death triggered an immediate and dramatic reversal of his financial fortunes, but one he would never enjoy. His estate, expertly executed by executors, paid off his debts by leveraging the incredible posthumous earning power of his music, name, and image. Through record sales, the This Is It film, catalog deals, and the sale of his remaining stake in Sony ATV for $750 million in 2016, the estate transformed a bankrupt legacy into a billion-dollar empire. In death, Jackson became more profitable than ever. But in life, he died deeply in debt, a prisoner in a gilded cage of his own making, his crown shining brightly but hollow, weighed down by the sheer cost of being the king. 6. The Hollywood heavyweight who threw his fortune away, John Henry "John" DeLorean, was born on January 6, 1925, in Detroit, Michigan. While not a traditional celebrity in the acting sense, he was a rock star of the automotive industry, a towering figure at General Motors who became a household name. After a spectacular rise at GM, he left to found the DeLorean Motor Company, fueled by a vision of a stainless steel gull-winged sports car and over $200 million in investments, including from celebrities like Johnny Carson and a controversial $50 million loan from the British government to build a factory in Northern Ireland. He lived the life of a corporate titan, with a lavish New York penthouse, a New Jersey estate, and all the trappings of immense success. In the late 1970s, he was seen as a visionary, a maverick poised to challenge the auto establishment. The dream began to crumble almost as soon as the first DeLorean DMC-12 rolled off the troubled Belfast production line. The car was plagued with quality issues, was underpowered, and was more expensive than projected. Sales were disastrously slow. As the company hemorrhaged cash, DeLorean resorted to increasingly desperate financial maneuvers. In 1982, with the company on the brink of collapse and the British government threatening to call in its loans, DeLorean crossed a line from which there was no return. He was caught on tape by the FBI in a hotel room, agreeing to bankroll a $60 million cocaine smuggling scheme, allegedly to inject cash into his dying company. The arrest and very public trial for drug trafficking in 1982 was the final, humiliating blow. Although he was eventually acquitted on grounds of entrapment, his reputation was destroyed. The DeLorean Motor Company was liquidated. He lost his homes, his assets, and was left facing a mountain of legal bills and civil lawsuits from investors and creditors. The man who had been a symbol of American industrial glamour was now a symbol of hubris and scandal. He spent the next 2 decades battling in civil courts, declaring personal bankruptcy, and trying, unsuccessfully, to launch various other ventures. John DeLorean died on March 19, 2005, in Summit, New Jersey, from complications of a stroke. He died in relative obscurity and poverty, living in a small apartment paid for by his third wife. His estate was negligible. The iconic car he created found immortality in the Back to the Future films, but its creator died having lost every penny of the vast fortune he had commanded. His story is a classic tale of a brilliant flameout, where monumental ambition, when mixed with financial desperation and ethical compromise, leads to total ruin. 7. The teen idol who never grew his savings, David Cassidy, was born on April 12, 1950, in New York City. In the early 1970s, he became a global superstar, the heartthrob lead of the TV series The Partridge Family, and a chart-topping solo recording artist. At the height of Cassidy mania, he was earning the modern equivalent of millions per year from records, sold-out stadium tours, and a torrent of merchandise. He was arguably the biggest teen idol in the world, with his face on every magazine and his records selling by the tens of millions. The money seemed endless, and for a brief, shining moment it was. Cassidy's financial troubles began with the fickle nature of fame. As the teen pop craze faded in the mid-1970s, So did his massive income. Unlike more versatile actors or musicians, he was typecast as the teen idol and struggled to transition to adult roles. He continued to tour and perform, but the venues grew smaller and the paychecks shrank. Compounding this was a lifestyle that never adjusted to his new reality. He spent lavishly on homes, cars, and a rock star lifestyle, assuming the hits would keep coming. He also made several poor investments in real estate and business ventures that failed to pan out. The cash outflow consistently exceeded the inflow. The situation became critical in the 2010s. Cassidy filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2015. Court documents revealed a staggering depth of financial trouble. David Cassidy died on November 21, 2017, from liver and kidney failure. His final years were marked by this financial distress and well-publicized struggles with alcoholism. He worked tirelessly on the road, performing in regional theaters and casinos, not for fame or legacy, but out of sheer necessity to pay his debts and survive. He died having lost the entire fortune of his youth, a poignant reminder that fame is a currency that can devalue overnight, and that the loudest applause does not pay the quiet, persistent bills of a lifetime. 8. The rap pioneer who lost a fortune to fees. Antoine Treach Glover was born on December 2, 1970, in East Orange, New Jersey. As the frontman of the groundbreaking hip-hop group Naughty by Nature, he helped define the sound of 1990s rap. The group's anthems like OPP and Hip Hop Hooray were massive crossover hits, selling millions of records, winning a Grammy, and cementing their place in music history. The group's success translated into significant wealth through album sales, touring, and publishing royalties. At their peak in the mid-1990s, the members were multi-millionaires, enjoying the rewards of their cultural impact. The unraveling of this wealth for Treach is a textbook case of financial mismanagement and the perils of success without sophisticated guidance. Like many artists who come into sudden wealth, Treach and his groupmates were young and financially inexperienced. They reportedly fell victim to bad advice, poor investments, and excessive spending on the trappings of success cars, jewelry, entourages, and luxury homes. More insidiously, the complex world of music royalties and publishing, with its advanced recruitment and accounting, meant the actual money reaching them was often less than they believed they had earned. The true extent of the disaster became public in 2011 when Treach filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The filing was shocking in its detail. He listed assets of just $9,500 against staggering liabilities of $1.1 million. His debts included over $400,000 in back taxes to the IRS in various states, tens of thousands in credit card debt, and unpaid bills for everything from child support to car loans. The bankruptcy trustee discovered he had virtually no cash, and his primary asset was a 2008 Cadillac Escalade. The man who had co-written and performed one of the most recognizable songs in pop culture was legally bankrupt. Today, Treach continues to perform with Naughty by Nature and as a solo act, and he has worked in television and film. He has rebuilt a career and a living, but the multi-million-dollar fortune of the 1990s is gone. His net worth is a modest fraction of what it once was. His story is not unique in hip-hop. It is a foundational cautionary tale for a genre where wealth is often displayed as the ultimate prize, but the knowledge to preserve it is rarely part of the success package. He lost a fortune not to one catastrophic error, but to 1,000 small cuts, fees, taxes, lifestyle, and a lack of financial armor. 9. The starlet who sparkled and went broke. She was born Sarah Jane Fulks on September 29, 1917, in El Dorado, Kansas, but the world would know her as the glamorous, husky-voiced actress and singer Jane Russell. Discovered by Howard Hughes, she became an instant sex symbol and star with her controversial debut in The Outlaw, 1943. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, she was one of Hollywood's highest-paid actresses, starring in hits like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes alongside Marilyn Monroe. She earned millions in salary and astutely negotiated a percentage of the profits for some films, a rare move for an actress at the time. She also had a successful singing career and lucrative endorsements, most famously for a line of brass designed for Fula figures. For decades, she lived a life of considerable luxury. Russell's financial downfall was a slow, creeping vine of misfortune and generosity. She was famously kind-hearted and financially supported a vast array of family members, friends, and hangers-on. She invested in numerous business ventures that failed, including a travel agency and a mining company. A significant portion of her wealth was lost to a series of unscrupulous business managers and advisors who mismanaged her funds or outright embezzled from her. Like many stars of her era, she also faced the punitive marginal tax rates that could claim over 90% of top earnings, meaning the millions she made on paper yielded far less in her bank account. The final, crushing blow came from an unexpected source: the Internal Revenue Service. In the 1970s and 1980s, as her acting income dwindled, the IRS hit her with massive bills for back taxes, penalties, and interest from years of complex filings and questionable advice from her handlers. Unable to pay the mounting millions she allegedly owed, she was forced to sell her beloved sprawling ranch in Sedona, Arizona, and other personal assets. By the 1990s, the actress, who had been a millionaire many times over, was reportedly living on a modest Social Security check and the occasional residual payment. Jane Russell died on February 28, 2011, at the age of 89. She spent her final years in a small, comfortable house in Santa Maria, California, a far cry from the opulence of her starlet days. Her estate was minimal. While she maintained her dignity and faith throughout, her financial story is a classic Hollywood tragedy of the golden age. A star who shone brightly, earned enormously, but was left with nothing due to a toxic combination of bad luck, worse advice, and the unrelenting grasp of the taxman. 10. The wild thing whose money tamed itself. Steven Tyler, born Stephen Victor Tallarico on March 26, 1948, in New York City, is the iconic scarf-draped frontman of the rock band Aerosmith. As one of the best-selling American rock bands of all time, Aerosmith generated hundreds of millions of dollars from album sales, monumental world tours, and later lucrative licensing deals. At the band's commercial peak in the late 1980s and 1990s, Tyler was earning tens of millions per tour cycle. He owned multiple lavish homes, a collection of classic cars, and indulged in every excess the rock and roll lifestyle had to offer. For a long time, the money seemed as endless as the party. Tyler's financial problems were a direct product of that lifestyle. For decades, he and his bandmates were notorious for their extravagant spending on drugs, hotels, private jets, and general mayhem. While the money was coming in, it was also flowing out at a terrifying rate. More structurally, like many bands from their era, Aerosmith had signed notoriously bad record deals early in their career, giving away a huge percentage of their royalties and publishing rights. They also went through periods of serious mismanagement, where money was siphoned off or poorly invested. Tyler's own personal spending never slowed. Even during the band's fallow periods in the early 1980s, the reckoning came not with a single bankruptcy filing, but with a constant, grinding need to work. Even as a multimillionaire on paper, Tyler found himself perpetually needing to generate massive income to fund his lifestyle and cover his tax bills. He revealed in interviews that despite Aerosmith's success, poor early contracts and decades of spending meant he was not as secure as one would assume. He took the high-paying judging role on American Idol, not for fame, he admitted, but for a guaranteed, substantial paycheck to stabilize his finances. It was a stark admission. The demon of Screamin' needed a TV gig to pay the bills. Today, Steven Tyler is financially stable, with an estimated net worth in the tens of millions. This security, however, is the result of decades of relentless touring well into his 70s, the American Idol rescue, and finally, in later years, more astute management of his assets and publishing. He did not lose everything to bankruptcy, but he came perilously close to draining the well dry. His story is one of a man who, for most of his life, treated a colossal fortune like an inexhaustible resource, only to discover in middle age that he had to tame his wild spending habits and work constantly to rebuild the fortress he had spent decades partying down.